Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to our new time slot. Tonight Mike and I are joined by accomplished author and paranormal researcher Nicole Strickland. She's local to me. I obviously live in San Diego, even though I sound like I don't. So we're gonna go through a lot of information with Nicole tonight. But first of all, can I say on behalf of Mike and I, welcome to the show, Nicole, and how are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so honored to be on your show, and I'm doing fantastic. I think it's going to be a great time.
Marvelous, thank you. Well, there's a lot of information on you because you've written so many books and you've been doing investigations for so many years. And one of the things that struck me, I'd like to. I mean, we'll go back to some of your earlier experiences because I want to understand. You know, when we do conversations, it's as much about the person as the event. What's the most intense experience you've ever had of a paranormal nature?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. I would say, and I've shared this story before with many people and even on radio shows, but it bears sharing again because it's so profound. During my college years, my senior year of college, my mom's mom, so my maternal grandmother, was diagnosed with congestive heart failure, and she lived to like 96 years old. And so I remember my grandmother calling me the day before she died in the afternoon, and she just wanted to ask if I was okay and just make sure that everything was okay. And I thought it was odd at the time. I'm like, gosh, you know, I'm in the middle of college, about ready to graduate soon. Why would she call and ask me that? So I now, in retrospect, have figured out that she was making the rounds and going around to her different family members and before she passed, and just wanted to make sure that everyone was okay before she made the journey onward. So I get a call the next day from my mom, and my phone rings, and I answer it. My mom's like, "Oh, Nicole, I love you so much." And I immediately knew that something tragic had happened, and I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she said, "Grandma passed away early this morning." So needless to say, I was devastated. I caught the earliest flight out to San Diego that I could. I was actually attending the University of Arizona at the time in Tucson, Arizona. And so I spent some time over the weekend with the family, and my grandmother had a very small service. And then when I went back to Tucson, Arizona, after a few days, I started having odd experiences in my apartment that I didn't experience before her passing. The first two experiences were my bedroom doorknob and the front doorknob would rattle, specifically at night, as if someone was like touching the doorknobs. And so I tested them. I made sure that it wasn't like my downstairs neighbors or vibration that could be causing them. I just couldn't come up with a logical explanation. And one thing interesting is that when my grandmother was alive, she every night would go around and check the front door, check the back door, and make sure that they were locked. So I didn't really make the connection at that point that it was her, but a couple of nights later, I was on my bed and I was just studying for class, and I felt this disembodied hand caress my cheek, my face.
Oh, no! What did that feel like?
I felt like a hand there, and it felt tingly, but there was no hand there. But it felt comfortable. It felt like if it came from someone that I knew. And so that's when I started to connect the dots. And I'm like, oh, my grandmother, her name was Helen. Could she be here in spirit form? And so I thought about that for the next couple of nights. And then the third experience I had, again, I was doing studies for school, and I was again on my bed, and out of my left peripheral vision, I saw movement over near my closet area. And when I looked, my grandmother was standing there. She looked about 10 years younger. She was wearing one of her favorite, like, royal blue and white flower house dresses that she always wore. Like I said, she was about 10 years younger. It looked as though there was a spotlight lit behind her but facing toward her back, and she just stood there with a slight smile on her face for about a second and a half, which is kind of long for a ghost sighting. And that was so profound to me. I immediately just started crying, and I remember calling my mom on the phone, and I told her about all the experiences I had with her. And so my mom and I decided to, even though we were stayed apart, my mom was in San Diego, I was in Arizona, we decided to openly talk to Helen and let her know that the family is okay and that she's free to move on to wherever she needs to go. She doesn't need to feel that she needs to stay around anymore to look after the family, that we're all okay. And ever since we did that, the experience has stopped. So I would classify that for me as my most profound encounter. I don't ever expect to have something so profound like that ever happen to me again. Yeah. And that one event is really what, even though I've always had an interest in the paranormal, that one event really, really motivated me to work as a paranormal investigator. So, yeah.
No, that was obviously very profound. I just want to cut back just a couple of questions I have about it. I know it's very personal, but you mentioned your grandmother making those calls. Did your grandmother, before she died, did your grandmother indicate that she felt she might be passing, or was she just like, how are you, and are you feeling okay, Nicole? Can you remember?
She never indicated it. I almost, if I remember correctly, it was in the afternoon, and she kind of had, if I remember correctly, a little sadness to her voice. So maybe she subconsciously knew that she was going to pass. But I just thought it was very odd because she called me and she was like, "Are you okay?" I thought, "Oh, that's weird," So, but there was now that I remember, there was a little bit of like a forlorn sadness to her voice. So I think that she was making the rounds and getting ready for her transition. Yeah.
Now, when you saw her, did she? I mean, this is a difficult question, but so that we can all understand a little, because you got, as you say, you got quite a long look at your grandmother.
Yeah,
did she look
it was long.
A person, or did she look translucent? Did she look like she was a solid entity?
She looked as solid as, like, if you were looking at me right now or me looking at you, completely solid, no translucent nature to her. And she looked very healthy, too. She looked like 10 years younger, hair a vibrant red. She used to have her hair red when she was younger. Just her skin tone was it looked very young and just vibrant. She looked even like, because when she died, she was more on the thin side, so she looked a little bit more, heavier. The apparitional site that I saw was heavier, so, and like I said, about 10 years younger. But she was solid, and then what was interesting is it looked like there was a light behind her that was shining like against her back, if you will. So I don't know if that was her aura, perhaps, or I equate it to like a spotlight that was shining like against her back. But it was just so profound. It was amazing.
What emotion did you feel? You said she was smiling. Is that correct?
A slight. She didn't say anything. There were no words exchanged. It wasn't a smile to where I could see her teeth or anything. It was almost a slight smile of, and if she had said anything, it was almost like the feeling I got when I looked at her face. It was just kind of a slight smile. I didn't see any teeth, but it was just, her facial expression looked like she was at peace and that she was, comforted in some way, which was,
very good.
Awesome. And yeah.
Well, that's very good. Now, when I was reading about you, am I right in thinking that you felt you've had experiences since you were a child of some sort of paranormal nature, but you could never rationalize them? What sort of experiences do you think you had?
Well, I mean, obviously they started when I was really young. I think back when I was even like 2, 3, 4 years old. And of course, during that time, it's common for kids to have the so-called imaginary friends. But I remember a couple experiences, and I was 5, I want to say 4.5 or 5 at the time. And this was in our house in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was born in Huntington Beach, California, which is a little beach town about an hour north of San Diego. And then my dad got a job in Las Vegas, so I moved to Las Vegas with my mom and dad when I was about 1.5, and then lived there until I was 7. So we were in a brand new home, and we had just gone swimming because we had a pool in our backyard. And so it was dusk out. It wasn't quite like completely dark yet, but it was, pretty dusk, and you could start to see the stars in the sky. And my mom and dad and I were standing out by our spa, and I remember seeing this like black mass. It wasn't really shaped like a human or anything, but it moved in between us. And I remember, I don't know why I remember this, but I remember distinctly saying to my mom and dad, Mom, Dad, or Mommy, Daddy, look at the draft. I don't know why I would have said draft at that young age. I referred to it as a draft. That was something that I recall. And then also there was an older man, and I don't think, now that I look back, that it was an imaginary friend. I do think that this was a real spiritual entity. He looked as though he came from maybe the gold rush days. He had on like a black and red sort of vintage gold rush days type of attire, shirt almost like checkered, like older man, and he would come frequently, and I would talk to him. And my parents, I don't remember like what was said because I was so young. I mean, I was like 4 or 5 when this happened, but I do remember at times my mom and dad saying, what's she talking to, or even asking me, who are you talking to? And I don't remember what I even told them, but I do think that was kind of when I started to communicate with the other side and the spiritual realm. And so I've always had that innate interest in studying the spiritual realm. So
do you consider yourself to be a psychic, Nicole? And if so, what does that mean to you? What sort of gift do you think you might possess?
Well, I think, and this is my own personal belief, I think that all of us have the ability to be intuitive. I think all of us have the ability to have psychic awareness, so to speak, but I equate it to like a sport. The more you're exposed to it, the more you practice it, the better you get. I sure, in my years of doing this sort of work, I've noticed my own intuitive nature increase. I'm more, clairaudient. I'm more clairsentient, if you will. So, but I don't ever classify myself as an absolute psychic, but I do work intuitively just on when I investigate, and even just in life. I'm more of an intuitive type of person, so I feel like when I investigate that I blend the intuitive metaphysical side with, I know it's not really a scientific, we're not really doing science per se, but I'm going to use that word. I blend the intuitive, metaphysical side with the science end of what we do.
Right, yeah, and it is something that, you've done this research for many years. I can tell you've written many books. Is it something you do full time, or do you do something else on the side? You don't have to tell me what it is. If you want to, that's fine. But is this a full time?
No, not at all. Yeah, no, I don't. I wish I did this full time. I mean, it does take a lot of my time. I mean, with my writing and presentations and investigations, it does take up a lot of my time. But it's my team does investigations completely voluntary, free of charge. We think that with the spiritual realm, it's not something that we can necessarily prove. So because of that, we don't feel comfortable, charging for our services. But I have spent many years as a teacher and school counselor. So right now I'm kind of thinking of changing careers. I'm doing a lot of freelance writing right now and things of that nature. But I mean, I wish I could be doing this full time. That would be amazing.
Yeah. No, I understand. I do expeditions in different parts of the world, but I also teach. Yeah, so we have a parallel.
Awesome.
So I'm teaching in San Diego. Okay, I mean that's very good. Now, do you want to tell us a little bit about the organization you work? Which your organization? Tell us a little bit about that, and then I want to move on to the Rancho. I'm going to pronounce this very badly. The Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, which you're very involved.
Perfect.
Yeah, was that all right?
That was awesome.
Okay.
You said it better than I say it. So
tell us all about it and your organization.
Sure. So I am the founder and co-director of the San Diego Paranormal Research Society. So we're one of San Diego, California's more well-established teams. We've been around since 2009. And so we investigate private residences, of course, businesses and historical locations. We've done many historical sites throughout San Diego, but we're also a very educational team, so we like to work with the community. We do presentations at libraries, at paranormal conferences and events, educating about not only haunted history of places in Southern California and San Diego, but proper ways to do investigations, proper protocol, paranormal research ethics, that sort of thing. So we're very involved in the community. And since 2011, we've been the official host of the Spirits of the Adobe tours at the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe. So the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe is up in Vista, California, and there's another land rancho out there as well called the Rancho Guajome. But the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe is kind of secluded. It's hard to find. It's right across the street from the Civic Center in Vista. And it's an old land rancho that was deeded to a Native American by the name of Felipe Subria in 1850. And so from that time on through 1989, when the city of Vista purchased the property, many different people lived on the premises, including like local, very historical figures known to San Diego, such as Cave Johnson Couts and his wife Isadora Bandini de Couts from the well-known Bandini family, and even some of their children throughout the years stayed at the Adobe. Other local people later on to the Vista community live there. The Pollards, Harry Pollard, a very well-known MGM producer, and then his silent screen actress wife, Margarita Fisher Pollard, they lived there from like 1931 to 1951. So the Adobe has seen some very well-known people throughout its years, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful historical location. And today it serves not only as like a museum and a spot for weddings. A lot of people get married there, but they also have like historical tours there. Of course, they have our tours. They have art exhibits there and all kinds of different events, even for the 4th and 5th grade school-age children up in Vista. They have what's called Adobe Days, so the kids take a field trip there and they get to learn about the rancho ways of life. So they have a lot going on there. But our tours specifically are designed to give a historical / paranormal look at the Adobe, because we feel that history and the paranormal are so closely connected, and they are a fundraiser for the Friends of the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe. That's who runs the Adobe and takes care of it its upkeep and whatnot. So our tours are a fundraiser, and then they're monthly. So there's 2 tours on the 3rd Friday of each month, 7 p.m. tour, and then a 9:30 p.m. tour, and we take guests through the different rooms, and we talk about the history, and we do some investigating. So we'll do like a divining rod session in the kitchen. We'll do like a spirit box session in the major domo room, which is like the head rancher's, head foreman's room. Then we'll do a collective group EVP session in the grand sala. So it's a really engaging, interactive tour, and so we've been really blessed to be doing that for so many years. And I do have to say that my San Diego Paranormal Research Society co-director, Allie Schreiber, is also my co-host on the tours. We run the tours together, so I'm really blessed to have her. Her and I work so well together. So it's great when you have, a really good friend and a really good teammate that you can gel so well with, and it just makes our investigations, that much more successful in the work that we do. So wanted to give her a little shout out.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, when you do these investigations, I mean, what sort of have you had any results that you've thought have been quite exciting, and if so, what are they?
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, specifically, like with the Rancho Buena Vista Adobe, and, Allie and I have talked about this. We don't know if it's because we've been going there for so many years on a monthly basis, and some of the intelligent resident energies there may know us. They know that we come with good intent. They know that it's worthy. We've earned their trust, so to speak. But we've been getting a lot of really historically relevant, clear, profound, instrumental transcommunication captures there. And I know that, devices like the spirit box can be very controversial. A lot of times it's subjective. You may not necessarily understand what's coming through, especially if you're not sure if it's a radio fragment or if it's sounds that you're matrixing. But when we do our questioning, we'll ask like historical questions related to the property, and we'll get clear responses back, like pertaining to those questions. And we've, on a couple of occasions, have had some interesting results through the spirit box that we've actually used those results and compared those to historical records, and we've found that the results that we've obtained on an investigation actually match historical records to the property. And so we've been able to verify a lot of history.
Very cool. Could you be specific? Is there something that you think you could share with me that would help to me to understand that?
Yeah, so one thing there is that in the back of the property there used to be a root cellar. We don't know, it's filled now with cement, but we don't know exactly how far it extended, but there was a root cellar back there. So on one of our investigations, we were asking questions because there's a section in the back where a lot of people feel drawn to. So we were asking questions about what's significant about this area, and we started to get responses about this root cellar and the fact that, food and animals and maybe even prisoners like horse bandits were kept down in that area. So we took that tidbit of information that we got, and we went to the Huntington Library in San Marino, California, which has a lot of Rancho Buena Vista Adobe history and Vista history, and we did, in fact, find out through the Huntington Library and through one of the docents that works at the Adobe that there was, in fact, a root cellar in the back. So that's one example I have. And so I think that's really rare to take a piece of paranormal evidence, if you will, and then you're able to verify, a piece of history with that. I don't think that happens too often.
No, that's very unusual, and that's why I wanted to understand some specifics. Now, in terms of interaction with spirits there, I mean, is there any of them that are particularly active, and what might they look like, and why are they active? Can you give me an example?
Oh, specifically at the Adobe, I think it's really intelligent. There's a lot of intelligent energy there. We have communicated with some of the past residents. We're not exactly sure who, but it seems that there is a connection. Because in order for me to classify like a place, I know the word haunted kind of has a negative connotation, but in order for me to classify the place as actually being haunted, there has to be some sort of historical tie. And it does seem that some of the energies at the Adobe have some sort of historical tie there. There was one experience, this was I think back in the early 90s, and one of the docents that works there now, he's been working there for many years, there was a florist that was setting up flowers in the Grand Sala for an event. And this florist kept asking about this woman that was following him around and complaining about where he was positioning the flowers. And so he asked this particular docent, who is this woman? And there was no woman on the premises that day. And so he did some investigating just to make sure that, a guest didn't accidentally come on premises before the event, and there was no one there. But then this florist saw a picture in one of the rooms at the Adobe and was able to verify through that picture that was the woman that he saw. And that woman ended up being one of the daughters of Cave Johnson Couts and Isadora Bandini de Couts. So, but it's, out of the energy that's there specifically, they're very friendly, they're very interactive. Lots of people see a lot of like apparitional sightings there, a lot of disembodied voices. I've been touched a few times. Other people have, like hair tugs. Like one of our guests was touched on the head once. So lots of intelligent types of interactions.
So this you feel is a friendly place with spirits that are pleasant and interactive, and I can tell you enjoy being there, yeah?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it seems that the energy there is content. And, if they are earthbound, it's maybe by choice. That's something that we don't know 100%, but, based on our research there and the amount of time that we've spent there, it seems like it's the spiritual energy there is content and at peace and happy, which is good. We want that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where I spend a lot of time. Now, you mentioned that you go into businesses. In contrast, have you ever done investigations in places where you thought, oh, this isn't good? And what did you feel?
Oh my God, I have one example. So we investigated. This was back in 2010, and I'm going to keep the restaurant name confidential because I wouldn't want their business to be harmed because of the story. But it was a restaurant up in the Oceanside area, and so we were invited to investigate. And so we got there and we were setting up, our equipment, getting ready and all that. And we were about an hour into our investigation, and there were 6 people there, and so 3 of us were downstairs, and then the other 3 were upstairs, and so we had 2-way radios to communicate with each other. And about an hour in, I get radioed in from the other team upstairs, and the person upstairs said, "Stay where you are, this place has just been robbed." So this was had nothing to do with any of the paranormal energy, but it's just an example, like you have to be, no matter what, you have to be on guard, you have to be careful. So I guess 2 guys roamed in armed with a gun, and so the police were called, and there were helicopters flying ahead, and we had to stay there for a couple of hours just in case the police questioned us, but we had every right to be there. We had our, investigation permission form signed and all that, but it was one of those situations that could have, become very tragic, and it ended up, okay. But I've been in other places where I've investigated, whether it's business or even like a private residence, where I've just felt not that the energy was like malevolent or evil. I think that sort of energy is very rare, but I just felt that the general energy there just wasn't at peace. And so, and I just felt there have been places where I've felt like I just shouldn't be there. And so whenever I feel like that, I usually I want to respect the energy. I don't want to irritate it. And so whenever I have a situation like that, I usually just honor it and leave the premises. But we're all about trying to respect the energy and, and keep the integrity of the location as intact as possible. So we're always, preaching the whole para-ethic, so to speak. So
I understand. Can you give us an example of where you felt like that, and what sort of, did you get a sense of what sort of spirit it might be and what it might want?
I felt an example of, like, not
you
just
felt,
or where I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
There was one place up. I'm going to keep the place confidential just because it's now an active college university, but there was an older portion of the site, and it's up in north of LA a little bit in Camarillo. I'm sure that people that are listening probably know what place I'm talking about, but I have investigated that location a couple of times, and there's a lot of energy that's at unrest there. It just seems like some of the energy is earthbound and just stuck and just not in a peaceful frame of mind whatsoever. And so there was one situation where I was down in one of the rooms, and I had a camera positioned toward the other end of the room, and my camera didn't really pick it up, but I saw with my eyes this shadow, and not like the classic shadow person, but like a shadow, humanoid shadow form that manifested large, over 6 feet tall, just charge at me. And so I don't get scared easily. I mean, I've been in places, abandoned prisons. I've been in, abandoned hospitals. I don't get scared easily with energy. But this one situation, like, I got startled, and I basically told the group, I'm like, no, I can't stay in here. Whatever's in here doesn't want us here, and it's just not comfortable, and I think we need to respect that and leave. So we ended up leaving that night, but that doesn't happen too often with me. Normally, like, the places I go in, the energy seems willing to communicate, so which is good. But that's like one experience that I can remember that was really uncomfortable.
Now, tell us a little bit about. We'll move on to slightly lighter matters. I hope. I don't know. We'll see what you say. Tell us a little bit about the Queen Mary. What is it, and what do you do there?
Oh my God, I love Queen Mary. Have you been to the Queen Mary at all?
No, I've never been, Nicole. I'm going to go with you.
Got to make the trip. So RMS Queen Mary is now. So Southern California is very lucky to have this historic gem. So it's in Long Beach right now, and she came in Long Beach on December 9th of 1967. So the Queen Mary is a British ship built in Scotland. Was built in 1934, but design concepts began in 1926, and this was at a time when other countries were at competition with each other to build like the biggest and fastest ships. So the Queen Mary is often compared to the Titanic just because she looks similar, but the Titanic obviously, had a different builder, had the 4 smokestacks, and was smaller than the Queen Mary and could actually fit inside the Queen Mary. But so she was built in 1934 and had her launch on September 26, 1934, and then had her maiden voyage on May 27, 1936. And so the Queen Mary was designed along with her sister ship, the RMS Queen Elizabeth, to travel the North Atlantic run from Southampton, England, to Cherbourg, France, to New York City for luxury ocean liner passenger services. And so the Queen Mary carried so many different people from all walks of life: business moguls, members of the aristocracy, actors and actresses, you name it, students. So many people traveled on the Queen Mary. And so until 1939, she was resumed her ocean liner travels. And then with the advent of World War II, they needed fast, large liners to carry large divisions of servicemen to and from destinations. And so that's when the Queen Mary, along with some other ships, even her sister ship, were called to duty. And so then during the whole length of World War II, she was a troop ship. She carried Italian and German prisoners of war. She was a hospital ship at one point, carrying injured soldiers to the United Kingdom. She helped repatriate soldiers after the war, getting them back to their homelands, and also carried war brides, around 22,000 war brides, to the United States and Canada. So she's had an extensive career. And then after World War II, she was refitted back to an ocean liner and resumed her North Atlantic run until 1967, when Long Beach won out and bought the Queen Mary for $3.45 million. So she's been moored in Long Beach ever since. So my introduction to the Queen Mary was in the year 2000. There's a Carnival cruise port that's right adjacent to the Queen Mary. And so for one of my spring breaks during college, one of my friends and I decided to go on like a 3-day Mexican cruise where it spent a day at sea, and then we went to Catalina, and then we went down to Ensenada. And so my first introduction to the Queen Mary was from the back seat of my friend's mom's car. And I saw the Queen Mary, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what a magnificent ship. I'm going to go there one day. And so that day came in 2005, and I remember parking my car in the parking lot, and I remember taking the elevator and embarking up on A deck, where that's one of the hotel decks and where the hotel lobby is. And I stepped off the gangway onto the ship, landed on A deck, and the first thing I said to myself was, oh my gosh, I have been on this ship before. But that was my first time. So there was like an immediate soul connection, an immediate love that I just instantly fell in love with the ship. So ever since, I've been doing a lot of history or historical research on the ship, and I've done a lot of paranormal research for about 15 years too in various areas of the liner. Queen Mary is known as one of the most paranormally active haunted locations on the entire planet. And so I've been to some pretty, serious haunted locations like Waverly Hills Sanatorium, if you will. And I still say the Queen Mary just delivers. It's just consistent amounts of activity, from month to month, day to day. So many people go in and day out wanting to experience not only her history but her hauntings. So but paranormal aside, I mean, the ship just has a beautiful historical legacy, and it's something that everyone should visit before, they die. So.
Well, tell us. I mean, that was a very eloquent description of it, and thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about why you think there's so much activity there, and what have you personally experienced seeing?
Well, I consider the Queen Mary like a mecca for paranormal researchers. I think it's like a lab. Definitely can be considered a lab for paranormal researchers just because of the amount of consistent types of experiences people have there. I mean, from cold spots to disembodied voices to apparitional sightings to shadow figures to psychokinetic energy. I mean, it has it all. I think that there are many different theories out there that can possibly explain why the Queen Mary is such a hotbed for supernatural activity, but I think that those theories aside, and I'll get into some of them in a second, I think those theories aside, there's that elusive layer that maybe we're not meant to know until we cross over, if you will. But I think her history alone, just because the Queen Mary is one of the most historical vessels ever built, and I think her history alone, makes her a good foundation for having so much spiritual energy. I also, and this is my own personal opinion of the ship, how like when you travel to a different state, they have welcome centers, and you stop at the welcome center and you get acquainted with a little bit about that state. I feel that there's something very special about the Queen Mary, and that she's almost like a stopping over point for spiritual energy. Some energies travel through her and don't stay. Some come through, may not have a historical connection to the ship, but are drawn to the ship and for some, odd reason, and they may, like I said, may choose to stay. They may choose to leave and just travel through. I think that the Queen Mary is one big giant portal, if you will. Also, other reasons too. I mean, she sits in a body of water, so there's that. If it's theorized that ghosts and spirits may be made out of some sort of electricity or static energy, water is a natural conductor for that, so maybe the water helps charge her spiritual energy. Some of the items that are used to construct the ship, for example, the former first and third class pool has mother of pearl quartzite ceiling on there. We know that quartzite can be, an element or a crystal that highly retains spiritual energy. Her manganese bronze propellers could have something to do with it. Also, there were 56 different varieties of woods from all over the world that were used to construct some of the inner cabins of the liner and inner rooms of the liner. So, I mean, where did those woods come from? Is there any energy contained within those woods? Some of the items, the Art Deco items in the ship. I mean, there's so many different theories. I think another one, too, and I discussed this in my books, is there's like a psychokinetic reason, too, because you have so many people day in and day out going there, and they not only want to tour the ship and learn about the history, but they want to go on the paranormal tours. They want to investigate the ship. They want to experience a haunting. They want to visit with some of her popular spirits. So there's so many people psychokinetically putting that out there on the ship, and so maybe that creates a layer of, some of her hauntings and some of her paranormal energy. I think there's so many different theories, but I also think this weird, mystical, elusive reason that I just can't explain. You know, it's just there's something very spiritual about the Queen Mary, at least in my opinion. And it's funny because a lot of people that I've talked to, even former crew and former passengers, have felt that way too. So she draws you in. It's amazing. I mean, I could talk about her for hours.
Well,
really,
no, I believe you. I mean, but when you think that this obviously the ship is an energy conductor of spirits. I mean, is there evidence of that? Are there spirits that are intense activities that can back up that? And if so, can you give us an example?
Oh, I don't know if I have an example of an actual, of that. I know that one of my friends, his name's Tony, he's an amateur radio operator, and he builds crystal radios. And so he and I were actually on the ship one day, and he was telling me that, in his opinion, he thinks the ship is one big giant transmitter and receiver of spiritual energy, because you have, in the bridge portion, you have what's called the bosun's balls. That's what they're called. And so that's a big giant EMF grounding plane right there. And then the ship has miles of like copper wiring throughout. And then you have pretty much in the center of the ship, you have that mother of pearl quartzite crystal ceiling. And so those are the elements needed to make a crystal radio. So he was telling me about his theory that he thinks the ship is just one big giant, transmitter and receiver of energy. And I was like, God, that's so profound. That's pretty interesting. And he gave me permission to talk about that in one of my books. But I don't have, actually from an entity there that has, I don't have evidence actually from an entity that has said, that has confirmed theories or theories and for why the ship is so active. But that's, you've given me an idea. That could be like some questioning that, absolutely, that, future investigations, maybe that can be some probing that we can do, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, why are they there? I mean, moving on to the spirits that are there. I was reading that there's allegedly an engineer, a lady in white, possibly children. Can you give us some examples of some of the things that you and your team have encountered?
Oh gosh, I have so many. So I enjoy interacting with all the energies there, but there are two energies, and I say energies, but two spiritual entities there that are more widely known, and these two I've come to have a good rapport. I've built a good rapport with them over the years. They are absolute intelligent. They're not residual in any way, in my opinion. So one of them is named Jackie, and again, she's not a documented passenger at all. She's about 6 or 7 years old. She was coined by the late Peter James. Peter James, and I don't know if even before he coined her, if she even existed on the ship. We don't really know her origins, but she's about 6 or 7 years old, and she's pretty much seen and felt throughout the entire ship, but she's very attracted to the former first and third class pool. A lot of people have experiences with her. I know that I have experience. I've seen her. She looks very similar to like a Shirley Temple. Very, very highly evolved spiritual energy in my opinion. I almost think that she's the spiritual ambassador of the Queen Mary. It seems as though that other energies know her. I've had like EVP captures and disembodied voices that I've heard from other spiritual entities addressing her. So very, very highly evolved energy. Oh, go ahead.
Just pause there, just so I can understand a little bit, if I may. You said you've seen her. What did she look like? Again, did she look like a person? Did she look like a shadow? What did she look like?
I've seen her a few times. So the first time I saw her was actually the very first time I spent the night on board, and this was at 7. And so I was on the forward port side of A deck, and I was leaving my stateroom, I think, to go eat or have lunch or something, if I remember. And I just felt intuitively that there was someone standing behind me. And so when I looked around, when I turned around, I saw this little girl, solid, not translucent in any way, solid, about 6 or 7 years old. And at that time, I didn't really know who Jackie was, yet I was still in the beginning stages of getting to know a lot about the spiritual energies there. And she was standing there. She had like a vintage dress on, curly hair, kind of like how Shirley Temple used to have her hair. And she just stood there and she waved at me. She lifted up her hand and waved at me, and then she just demanifested. And so that was really, really profound. And then the second time I saw her, I was standing on the forward stairs in the pool, and I didn't see her entire body. This was a partial manifestation, and I saw on the port side upper level of the pool, I saw her shoulders, neck, and head float toward me. And it
wow.
It was weird. She was solid but blurred. That's all I remember, but I could still make out the facial, characteristics and the curly hair, and she had like a bow or some sort of bow. I think it was a bow or barrette, something in her hair. But that was really quick. And then I've seen glimpses of her, but those two sightings that I've seen of her are the most profound. But she loves to sing songs. She loves to interact with guests. Pretty amazing. And then the other energy, out of respect for the family, well, his name is John, but I'm going to leave his last name private, just out of respect for the family. But he was an 18-year-old crew member that came from Yorkshire, and so he joined the Queen Mary March of 1966, and so he was assigned to the boiler rooms. There were 5 boiler rooms on the ship, and he was assigned to, I think it was either boilers 3 or 4, I'm not sure of the number, as a fireman and bilge cleaner. But on this particular voyage, I think it was number 482 or 483, he was assigned to the aft engine room. And so he was found tragically wedged in watertight door number 13 on the starboard shaft alley of the aft engine room on July 10th of 1966. And so they found him about 3:55 a.m. They administered morphine. They got him out of the door, took him up to the hospital, and he sadly passed away, and his remains were sent back to his family. But he is extremely intelligent. He's been seen all over the ship, including even near the watertight door where he was found. I had a very profound apparitional sighting of him back in, I want to say 2015, 2016, and I was standing in boiler room number 4 looking forward to boiler room number 3, and the lighting in the room at the time was kind of dim. It took on like a sepia type of tone, very dim lighting, and I saw movement to my right, and I looked, and I saw John, and it was like my second sighting of Jackie. I only saw like his upper chest, shoulders, neck, and head, and he looked solid but maybe slightly translucent. It took on a sepia tone, and he floated again, kind of moved toward me with a slight kind of, not smirky, but kind of like a smile on his face, and then he floated toward me and then backed up and then just faded away. There's a historical picture of him, and it was as if that picture came to life. And so that was one of the most intense spirit sightings I've ever seen, actually, on the Queen Mary, but just in general. So, but there's so many encounters.
How did you feel when you see those, Nicole? So when you saw that girl, the head floating towards her, and the second gentleman, how did you feel? Do you feel happy? Do you feel sad? Do you read their energy? What's your emotion?
It's a good question. I know when I saw John that night, earlier that night, I was attending a paranormal investigation tour, one of the tours that's hosted on the weekends, and I was a guest on the tour, and we were doing an EVP session in the engine room, and it was weird. On this particular night, I was channeling John more so than I usually do. So I think that there's a connection with that and me seeing him later on in the night. I felt when I saw him, what came to me is I almost felt like he was just saying hi. He just wanted to say hi, and I wasn't alarmed. I didn't feel sad. It was almost like a relief seeing him. It's hard to explain. And the same with the times that I've seen Jackie. I feel whenever I see a spiritual energy, and I mean, whether it's me actually seeing a spiritual energy or if it's something else that's causing me to see what I'm seeing, I don't know. But I just feel honored that I have that momentary, time to experience that. It's like I feel like I'm like blessed in some sort of way to have that experience, if you will. That's the best way I can describe it.
Have any of them ever spoken to you?
I'm trying to think specifically on the Queen Mary or in general. Interestingly, no. When I've seen the majority of, or pretty much I'm trying to go through, your memory here. When I've seen spirit forms, either shadow forms or full-bodied manifestations, no, I don't usually, I've not had words at all said. It's just more, there's nothing, I can't see the mouth moving or anything like that. It's just, they're there. I'm trying to think, not that I can recall. That'd be awesome, though.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, and just lastly on the Queen Mary, just one more if I may. But those are the two most spirits. Have you seen anything else that you think, I should mention this one particular spirit as well, or are those the two that really stick in your mind?
Those are the two I think most talked about and most widely known. There's also John's a documented a death, so Jackie's not. We don't know her origins. There are a couple of other young female children that are seen in and around the ship. There's a young boy that's seen in like a sailor outfit, kind of like curly hair. We don't know his origins either, but he's been seen throughout the ship. There have been clusters of World War II servicemen seen roaming around the ship. Now, I seem to think that those might be residual sightings as opposed to intelligent, or maybe a combination of both. Interestingly, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, he was instrumental in increasing the troop capacity during World War II on the Queen Mary, and he actually sailed on the ship many times during the war, and the entire M deck was reserved for him and his cabinet. He even planned the D-Day invasion while sailing on the Queen Mary. He's been seen in spirit form. His cigar, he's been seen with the legendary cigar in his mouth, all over. People have, one interesting story is one of the maids attendants, I guess, if you will, was cleaning there's a suite on M deck, the church, it's called the Churchill Suite, and that was the suite he actually stayed in. And so there was a painting of him on the wall, I think that is still there. It's a painting of him on the wall in that room, and this person was cleaning the room, and she described Prime Minister Winston Churchill in the room. He looked solid. She saw the smoke coming off of his cigar. The cigar was in his mouth, and then he floated back up into the painting. That was her claim. And it was so intense that I believe, from what I've been told, she ran out of the room, and I'm not sure if she quit her job, but she was pretty, shaken up about the whole event. But he's been seen kind of throughout the entire vessel. I haven't seen him, but I have smelt, and there could be other, spiritual energies that have, that smoke cigars, but I have smelled this very potent phantom cigar smoke by his suite, and then also up in an area of sun deck where he used to stand a lot. So, I mean, there have been former, like, vintage, like, past people that are seen in, like, vintage dresses, like very elegant ball gowns and suits, so maybe like a residual sightings of passengers or even intelligent sightings of passengers. It's just, there's so much energy there. I mean, I don't know how much, because I think it might fluctuate from day to day, but I know that Peter James once said, in his opinion, he thinks like there are over 600 spiritual energies, if you will, on the Queen Mary. But like I said, it might fluctuate. day in and day out, depending on who's coming through. But
so there's a lot there. Busy. So in terms of you, I mean, what's next for you? Are you writing books? Your investigations? What's in the future for you, Nicole?
Well, I hope to continue doing my research and learning. You know, I consider myself a student of the paranormal research realm, and it's always great to, you know, investigate new locations. I feel like I learn something new each time I go out. But I'm working on a few other books right now. I also write for Paranormal Underground magazine periodically, and of course doing our tours, you know, at the Adobe, and I've been doing a lot of presentations lately too at libraries, San Diego libraries and conferences, so I hope to continue that. But just continuing my research and learning and discovering more about what's out there. It's so fascinating.
And if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Facebook, email? How would you suggest?
Well, Facebook or email. I have my own personal Facebook, and then I have, we have a main website for our team. That's SanDiegoParanormalResearch.com. Then I have my author website, which is all one word, author Nicole Strickland.com. And then I have a Queen Mary website, which is actually the title of one of my books, SpiritedQueenMary.com. And then, of course, I'm on Facebook and then Instagram, author Nicole Strickland on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm so bad with Twitter, though. I don't tweet a lot. But
no, I don't.
Twitter, yeah, I'm so bad at it. My Twitter account, I think it's at SD, the acronym for the team, SDPRS Nicole. But my email is listed like on my website, so I mean, you can easily find my email address and contact me. But it's so fun to talk with people and, you know, learn from people, because I think, you know, it's just a big learning opportunity, and I just look forward to more years of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to ask you your age because that would be inappropriate, but you, I'm sure you've got plenty of years to go with doing investigations. I'm sure of that. I mean,
yeah, you too.
Well, I hope so. I'll try my best. I'd like to come out with you sometime, if that's all right, Nicole.
That would be, you know, I was thinking that too. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm like, that'd be awesome. We should definitely meet up, and I would love to work with you. I think that would be fantastic.
I think I'd enjoy it. Well, I'm on your Facebook as well, and so I'll certainly send you a message, not least to thank you for the show. So we'll organise that sometime. But
thank you so much for having me on.
No, it's my pleasure. It's Mike's pleasure. You know, if I could ask you just one last question, what's the very next thing that you're going to be doing? Do you see?
Let's see. So oh my gosh, I have to think about that. I have several library presentations this month throughout San Diego. Different libraries have invited me to present. So we're doing I'm doing a presentation at the Escondido Library, and then San Marcos, Vista, Poway, so different library presentations. And then the last couple of years, I've gone on the morning news program. So it's called San Diego Living for the Queen Mary's Dark Harbor episodes. I believe I'll be doing that. And I think I'm filming for this documentary too sometime next week, but it's tentative. And then just our tours. We have Halloween tours at the Adobe, so those will be happening on the 31st. And just doing some writing and just keeping busy.
Be very, very busy. Well, thank you ever so much on behalf of Mike and I. My name's Adam Davis. It's been excellent and having you on the show, Nicole. I really do appreciate.
Thank you so much.
It's been interesting. I mean, your stories have been fascinating. I really enjoyed it. The hour's gone like that. So that's a compliment.
I know, right? It goes by so fast. Oh.
So I hope we'll hear from you again on our show. I'm sure we'd love to have you back. But in the meantime,
that would be a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
It'd be our pleasure too. So thank you ever so much for being such an excellent guest. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll speak to you soon. That was our excellent paranormal investigator, Nicole Strickland. Thanks so much. Speak to you soon. Good night.